Settling northwest of Mirkwood by 2501 TA, the Eotheod were led by Leod, a great horse trainer who died after being thrown from the back of a particularly willful and powerful white horse, whose ancestors were said to come from the Undying Lands of the West, brought by the Vala Orome who traveled throughout Middle-earth. Succeeded by his son Eorl, the 16-year-old lord tracked down the horse, demanding that it give up its freedom as payment for his father's death. The extraordinary horse, who some say could understand human speech, agreed and became Eorl's faithful companion for the rest of his life. Named Felaroth, meaning very strong, he became the father of the Mearas, the greatest horses of the Northmen, reserved exclusively for their rulers. Among Felaroth's descendants were Snowmane, the steed of King Theoden, who fought in the War of the Ring, and Shadowfax, a grey mare chosen by the wizard Gandalf, the only known Mearas given to someone outside the royal line. Further south, in 2509, Celebrian, wife of Elrond, took a trip to visit her parents, Galadriel and Celeborn, in Lothlorien when she was attacked by orcs, taken captive, poisoned, and cruelly tortured. Learning what occurred, her sons Elladan and Elrohir charged to her rescue, slayed the enemy, and returned her to Rivendell, where she was physically healed, but the emotional and psychological damage proved too much, and so she said goodbye to her family and set sail for the Undying Lands of the West. A year later, in 2510 TA, Gondor faced yet another invasion from the Easterlings, this time facing the Balchoth faction, possible descendants of the Wainriders, who waged their own war of conquest centuries earlier. Serving the interests of Sauron in Dol Guldur, the Balchoth were supported by the orcs of the Misty Mountains, resulting in the invasion of Calenardon from two sides. Fallen far from the strength they once held, Gondor's population in this region was low, and their garrisons minimal, allowing the Balchoth and orcs to quickly defeat and surround the northern army, while positioning themselves to hold back their southern reinforcements. Yet just as all hope seemed lost, their old allies, the Eotheod, arrived, responding to the Red Arrow, a symbol carried by a messenger of Gondor, which meant they were asking for military aid. After defeating enemy forces in the Battle of the Field of Celebrant, the Eotheod joined the northern and southern armies of Gondor in expelling the orcs and Easterlings from the province. With the war won, Cirion, steward of Gondor, rewarded the Eotheod for their service by gifting them Calenardon, the lands they fought for, allowing Eorl to move their people south and found the kingdom of Rohan. As part of this arrangement, both leaders swore a sacred oath, binding Gondor and Rohan as eternal allies who would come to each other's aid whenever needed. Using the beacons of Gondor as an initial warning of danger between the realms, the official call for military aid would continue to be a messenger carrying a red arrow. A few decades later, in 2545, the Easterlings renewed their invasion of Rohan, leading to the death of King Eorl and his horse Felaroth in the Battle of the Wold. Succeeding his father, King Brego continued the war, eventually driving the Easterlings from his lands, in addition to defending against Dunlending and Orc advances in the north and west. Bringing some measure of peace to their lands, he built the famed royal hall Medusel in the capital of Edoras, and held a celebration upon its completion. Yet this joy soon turned to tragedy, as the king's son Baldur took the opportunity to announce he would prove his valor by venturing into the paths of the dead. Thousands of years earlier, when Gondor first established their rule, the king of the mountain realm pledged his loyalty, yet when the final battle with Sauron approached, refused to fight, and fled with his men into the mountains, surrounding what became the paths of the dead. Furious at their cowardice, Isildur cursed them, keeping their spirits bound to the region until their oaths were fulfilled. Many years later in the Third Age, their ghosts continued to haunt these mountains, and so when Baldur marched forth onto the path, he was lost, never to re-emerge. Heartbroken at the death of his child, King Brego died of grief, leaving his second son Aldor as their ruler. A few decades later, in 2570, the Dwarves of Durin's folk faced yet another war to defend their homeland, when the dragons of the north descended upon the Grey Mountains, slaughtering their people and stealing their treasures. Known to target the dwarves due to their wealth, the dragon race was originally created by the Dark Lord Morgoth in the First Age, and after his defeat retreated north, where they bred new generations of their species. Attracted to treasure, these dragons would occasionally leave their lands to prey upon the peoples of the south, specifically targeting the 7 Dwarven clans as they lived in mountains and excelled as miners, collecting vast quantities of gold, mithril, and precious gems. Yet even so, regular dragon attacks did not become a serious problem until Sauron gifted 7 magic rings to the 7 kings of the Dwarves, a gift designed to enslave their people to the Second Dark Lord's will, but ultimately failed as they were resistant to such influence. Yet in one aspect, the rings did cause harm, as they enhanced both the natural abilities and desires of their wearers. Since the Dwarven kings already loved mining for treasure, the rings brought about obsession, gathering vast hordes of wealth, unlike anything they'd ever seen before. This greed then attracted the dragons, who laid waste to their homelands, destroying or consuming 4 of the 7 rings of power. Sauron, in turn, was able to recover 2 more, leaving the last one with the king of the Longbeard clan. Suffering their own hardships over the years, Durin's folk lost their homeland to the Balrog of Moria, and thus were split up, eventually settling in the Grey Mountains, Erebor, and Iron Hills. In the year 2210, King Thorin I called for their people to be reunited, choosing the Grey Mountains as their home. Yet the concentration of wealth in one area and proximity to the far north made them too tempting a target, and so in 2570 the war began, with dragons sweeping in to rain down destruction. Although the dwarves fiercely resisted, possessing a natural resistance to heat, which aided them in battle with some forms of dragon, in 2589, their king Dain I and his son Thror were killed by a cold drake, leaving Thror to inherit leadership and lead the retreat. Breaking up once more, some of Durin's folk followed the king to settle in Erebor, while others went with his brother Gror to the Iron Hills. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Lelo Senpai the Wanderer, Commander Abadi of the JL Admiralty, Sir Xavier, Defender of the Flame, and Renee the Demigod. If you'd like to help the channel, please go to patreon.com/civilizationx, where you can sign up and get early access to videos, vote on future content, and access the Patreon-only series Heroes of Lore and Legend.